Yeah, welcome to the Cutting Edge January 2024. We are going to be discussing UCT again because that's like the new big thing. And we're kind of pushing all the UCT things into Cutting Edge. We're not ready to bring it to Season 18 Cognitive Mechanics quite yet because it is still, in general, very experimental. So it's kind of a big deal and entirely necessary. So with that, we're trying to figure out all the specifics with UCT. And tonight, we're discussing a particular situation that we discovered with UCT when it comes to people's cognitive functions and how they utilize them. And I will be giving a small individual primer, once again, of what UCT exactly is, and then actually identifying for the rest of you folks how that matters and what it matters, from that point of view. So we're going to be using yours truly as an example, as well as Mr. Phibb. We're going to be whiteboarding that out so you guys can actually see from that point of view. We're going to do some ENTP-ness right here. All right, we got some ENTP. Naturally, we're going to have extrovert intuition. We're going to have TI parent, FE child, SI inferior, and then we're going to have NI nemesis, extroverted thinking critic, introverted feeling trickster, and extroverted sensing demon. But then also we're going to be looking at the other sides of the mind. So we have INTJ shadow right here. Naturally, we're going to be having ESFP superego here. And then up here we're going to have ISFJ subconscious here. And then with introverted sensing, extroverted feeling, introverted thinking, extroverted intuition here. And then extroverted sensing, introverted feeling, extroverted thinking, and introverted intuition here. Okay, so very important, right? All right, so now we're going to be looking at the UCT perspective. Okay, so we have the ENTP. We have Mr. Phibb. He is SDSF. Okay, and then we're just going to put Phibb, right? Okay, and then we have Mr. Chase, myself, yours truly, and then this is myself here. All right, cool. So my masculine primary function, according to my octagram, given that it is UDSF, is introverted thinking. Okay. Now, when you're looking at UCT, something that you guys have to understand about UCT is cognitive reflection. It is absolutely critical, which is the battlegrounds. Okay, we have the battlegrounds of Titans, we have the battleground of responsibility, the battleground of innocence, and the battleground of inhibition. Okay. Those four battlegrounds are absolutely critical in understanding how UCT actually works. So I'm going to write them up here. So we have Titans, okay? Then we have responsibility, okay? Something Zendaya's boyfriend should probably fucking figure out. We have innocence, even though I spelled that wrong, but I don't give a shit. And then maybe I didn't spell it wrong. I don't care. And then we have inhibition. Thank you, Chris Taylor, for this awesome in terms of the battlegrounds. Okay, so I have introverted thinking, masculine primary. Okay, that's my masculine primary function. It is the function that I am the most specialized in. Okay, it's specialization from a male perspective. It's specialization. Okay, right? Anyway, so introverted thinking, masculine primary. However, we have the dilemma function, which is over here, okay? So this is my masculine primary, okay? Masculine primary, right? And then we have the dilemma function here. And the reason why is because, as Mr. Phibb puts it, this is what your life dilemma actually is. Life dilemma entirely matters, right? Life dilemma is that whenever it comes to your life and decisions that you make from that point of view, or even things that you're perceiving from that point of view, from judgment or perception, etc., is that you always have a dilemma between these things. These things is basically how a human being is ultimately conflicted, okay? Their own personal conflict from that point of view. This is how a person is conflicted, right? The dilemma function, and then we go down here. This is how a person is internally conflicted. And they're either conflicted in terms of their perception, or they're conflicted in terms of their judgment. And in this case, since I am UDSF, obviously, I am conflicted between these two functions here. This is how I am conflicted, personally, because I'm always trying to weigh out the truth, or I'm always trying to figure out which principles are actually applicable or which principles are actually true from that point of view. It's entirely necessary that you folks actually understand the distinction here, because the dilemma function is what provides challenge to your primary function, whatever it actually is. So from this perspective, this ends up becoming, but let's look at Mr. Phibb. His masculine primary function is introverted sensing because he is SDSF, which means, guess what? It's battleground of inhibition. So like right here, you have your hero attached to the Titans, hero and demon, okay? And you have your parent, right? And your trickster. Then you have your child and your critic. And then you have your inferior, right? Linked to your nemesis function. So he is actually right here with these two functions, right? Introverted sensing and introverted intuition. Introverted sensing being his masculine primary right here. So Phibb's primary, right? Phibb's primary, right? Phibb's primary function is introverted sensing because he's SDSF, right? Now, if he was SDUF, introverted intuition would be his masculine primary function. Or if I was UDUF, well, guess what? Introverted feeling would be my masculine primary function, from that point of view, okay? Because remember, folks, introverted functions are ultimately masculine functions, extroverted functions are ultimately feminine functions from that point of view, which is pretty cool, right? And then naturally, his dilemma function is introverted intuition, so he's always in conflict based on what he wants versus what he's looking for his comfort zone, or what makes him feel safe, or what specific tastes or experiences he likes to have over and over and over again versus what he actually wants. He's always in conflict. The direction he's taking his own life versus the things that he's already experienced, it ends up becoming an ultimate source of conflict for him. This is ultimately how UCT currently works. This is obviously absolutely critical in terms of relationships, which we'll be exploring in depth in the upcoming Real Love Language course. I'm almost done with the course outline. I start filming it basically tomorrow, actually, is when I start filming it. And then we will have it hopefully out and released before Valentine's Day for all of you folks to enjoy. Real Love Language will be the most important course in terms of sexual relationships that we ever produce. It is absolutely critical that you folks are prepped and ready for that. It's going to be absolutely stunning. And as awesome, as stunning as Ego Hacking Your Fear was, Real Love Language is basically gonna it's gonna blow your mind so bad, you're gonna have to regrow a new one. Good luck with that, by the way. It's probably not gonna happen. So anyway, be that as it may, these are primary functions versus dilemma functions and the inner conflict that is represented. Now, with that being said, though, there is an issue. Because the masculine primary function, when we talk about feminine primary functions, these primary functions, basically how I would say is that primary equals specialization, right? It's ultimately what you yourself are mentally invested in, mentally specializing in per person. And this is affected based on your octagram point of view, right? Oh, Phibb's adding something here. And while he's doing that, I will randomly flip this butterfly knife for the lulz.
Like your top focus?
Yeah, the top focus. Thank you. So this is your specialization, and this is what each person naturally specializes in. It is the function that they themselves are utilizing the most. It is the function that they're specializing in the most. Now, most people assume, from a Jungian analytical psychology perspective, especially even from an MBTI point of view, even a little socionics, actually. And I have to admit, John Beebe, actually, according to his book, Energies and Patterns of Psychological Type, actually, most people claim that the function that you specialize in the most is actually a hero function. That's not true. The hero function just happens to be the function where your ego is at rest the most, other than your child function. Your so for me, that would be any hero and FE child. Same thing with Mr. Phibb, because he's also an ENTP. The thing is that because we have our different octagram variants from that point of view, our different octagram variants. And obviously there's S to UF and U to UF, for example. We end up specializing in a specific function. And what ends up happening with that specialization of that particular function, what ends up happening is that we find ourselves in a situation where it's not like having a new hero. It's just that every single aspect of a person's cognition actually ends up getting filtered through or run through your primary function. What is the function that you're specializing with? Every bit of cognition has to pass your specialization. It has to pass your primary function perspective. So the point is I'm trying to make here is that when it comes to your primary functions, whatever they are, everything, all of your other cognition actually passes, like it's check, basically. Like it's the most important thing that your brain is using all the time. It's what you're invested in the most. So this represents your specialization. Now, what is the opposite of specialization? Please check the thesaurus.
Antonym.
The antonym of specialization, which is very key because we've been trying to like label this function properly, because there is a phenomenon when it comes to UCT when you look at the 4 different octagram variants of each of the 16 types, which is entirely relevant. Okay, and Fib decided it'd be a great idea to label it the poop function, and that is not what we are going to be labeling it. But you know, I would like to say specialized, but then he's probably going to look it up on the thesaurus, and you know, the thesaurus is our favorite dinosaur here at CSJoseph.life. It is absolutely
General.
General.
Yeah, that's the.
No, that's gross. That's a terrible name. What other names are available?
General purpose, unspecified.
Unspecified? No.
All round.
All around? No.
That's just.
Okay. We don't know what the fuck to label it. Honestly, we don't. But I will explain the phenomenon. So, cognitive axis, right? Oh, there are different kinds of opposites. Yes, thank you, Duggo. Thank you. Are you looking for something meaning anti-specialized or not specialized? Sure, throw me all the antonyms or whatever you want with that, Duggo. I'd be happy. But I'm going to explain the phenomenon. And then basically, as I explain the phenomenon, perhaps you can actually just be like, aha, it's this. Great. And then that's what we'll name it. There's a phenomenon. And the phenomenon is cognitive axis. Okay? So whatever your primary specialization function is, okay, right here, end up being like you have cognitive axis, okay, equals X, Y, Z label, which we don't have yet, right? It might actually come up during the show, who knows? But the point is that what is in cognitive axis of my masculine primary function? Well, guess what? My extroverted feeling child, which is my unspecialized function, because for some reason I can't come up with a different label that actually makes any sense for the sake of the stream. But whatever, I'm trying to do my best here. But the point is that like, how many times you folks like actually heard me talk about how much I hate my FE child? Because I even know that like my FE child is like inept in that it's not actually able to fulfill what it's doing. So extroverted feeling ends up being the function that you're invested in the least. It ends up being the function that you're specialized in the least. Now, how does this even manifest? Okay, you all know that I loathe my extroverted feeling child function because it ends up becoming a problem where like I'm too compassionate, right? I help people that I shouldn't help in certain situations. It ends up becoming an absolute total shit show for me personally. Absolutely. It ends up becoming a huge problem. So, Mr. Phipp, how would you describe how terrible my FE child is compared to others?
I would describe you expect people to be grateful when there's no need for them to be.
I have unreasonable expectations of when people should be grateful to me when there is no need for them to be grateful to me. Basically, that's what he's saying. And yes, I agree. That is absolutely true. My FE child ends up having way too high expectations of other people. It's like hyper innocent. It's really annoying from that perspective, and it ends up getting into people's faces in a really negative way. And then what this ends up doing is creating way too high expectations of other people, valuing me basically, and valuing my ideas, etc., because of my masculine primary function. And as a result of that, it actually can harm my personal relationships with other people, right? But Fib also has the same problem too, because he has introverted sensing inferior masculine primary. And because of that, what is on axis with introverted sensing? Oh, that's right, extroverted intuition. So sometimes he's completely unaware of consequences to his own actions, and that's a lack of specialization, in extrovert intuition, where it's kind of like, God, it's almost like ignorance. Yeah, it's literally what I was thinking, like an ignorance, and is that really like the function that we're going to call it, ignorance? You know what I'm saying? All right, hold on. Someone said something. Okay, hold on. Oh, and naive. The naive function? Is that what we're going to call it? That's not true, because this is a child function, but your hero function is not naive. It's just, you don't have as much investment in the negative consequences of what could happen, basically. Because from your perspective, Mr. Phibb, you're all about enduring. And actually, would you be willing to share the story about enduring your family as a child? No, okay. No, we'll not do that. Okay, so the point is that he has given me many examples of how he has just endured a lot of social interactions with people in his life, and instead of actually being careful with those social interactions in his life, which would happen as a result of him being more invested in his extrovert intuition hero function, right? But he's not, because he's hyper-specialized in introverted sensing, which means he kind of ignores some of the extrovert intuition components from an axis perspective, right? Like this happens, right? Well, the same thing happens with me. I end up ignoring a lot of how extroverted feeling is, where I have like these unfair expectations how people should like me, how people should value me, because, hey, I know the most, so people should like me, so that's kind of thing. And I'm kind of pushing that on other people and having this unrealistically high expectation. But also at the same time, here's another way of like thinking, where I end up thinking it's like, well, everyone should actually value my help, and everyone will like to have my help. And at that point, not everyone actually really likes to have my help. And that ends up becoming a huge issue. Not everybody is willing to receive my help or is willing to like take my help. And I'm very ignorant of the fact that my help, even though I can solve any problem, TI masculine primary, I can solve any problem, and I could figure out any solution to any situation, but not everybody likes that. But I end up assuming that everyone likes that. Just like Phibb assumes that everything is safe, even though it's not. It ends up becoming an assumption as a result of ignorance. It's just ignorance, right? So that's what ends up happening. Why is this happening, though? This is key. But the point of the matter is that let me explain why this is happening. Okay, so the reason why is because when you cognitive transition, like for example, your subconscious, right? When you're cognitive transitioning in your subconscious, okay? When you're cognitive transitioning, the thing is that, like for example, we'll call it the ignorance function, or the ignorant function, fine, whatever, we'll do that. The ignorant function, okay, ends up turning into a parent, okay? It ends up getting that parent energy up here. However, when your UDSF is an ENTP, it doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. Let's say I go ISFJ mode. I'm all ISFJ and shit. I'm all ISFJ, whatever. I transition to ISFJ. My extroverted feeling child, does it really become parental? No. And even Doug was like, I wouldn't recommend calling it an ignorant function. That's nice that you wouldn't recommend that, dude, but maybe you should offer an alternative in the same statement. I'm sure you love ESTJs telling you that all the time as they project that onto you. I'm sorry that they do that to you, bro, but Just saying. I'm kind of borrowing from them right now. Anyway, so the point is that when you're cognitive transitioning into the parent, what's really interesting about cognitive transition in your subconscious, what this ends up doing is that it provides balance. It provides balance to whatever function that you're using as that you're specialized in, okay, your primary function. It provides balance when you're cognitive transitioning. The problem is that the function that is imbalanced is the function that is in axis with your primary function when you're cognitive transitioning with it. So my ISFJ subconscious is extroverted feeling. It's like a terrible FE function. It's not really able to get to that parent mode so easily. It's really not. It takes a lot of time, a lot of force, and a lot of effort to get this stupid, inept, FE child to actually behave parentally. So it's like I have ISFJ subconscious that still happens to have FE child at the same time. It's really annoying. Or if Mr. Fib, he has ISFJ subconscious, which is still doesn't really care that much about safety as much. Why? Because he can just endure everything. He can outlast everything. He's like, I got this, whatever. I could just rely on my SI. I got this. I can get through anything, no matter what. I could suffer through anything. I persevere through anything. Why the hell do I have to give a damn about safety if I'm strong enough to deal with all that shit? You see what I'm saying, folks? That's literally what is actually happening, okay? That's another issue, okay? And this is an example from our brains here. That's what's going on. All right, hold on. I got some questions here. Hold on. So Doug was like, could you give an example of trickster functions with someone with critic as primary poop trickster versus someone who doesn't have poop trickster? Why? Why do you want this, Dougo? Why do you want this?
Elizabeth, ENTP.
We'll stay on ENTP. We'll do Elizabeth. Elizabeth. We have Elizabeth here. She is SDUF, which means she has TE, feminine primary, extrovert thinking, feminine primary, which means she has introverted feeling. Apparently, we can't call it the ignorant function. According to Dougo, we can't do it, so we're probably not going to do it. So whatever. But this introverted feeling function is not specialized. It is terrible. It is very terrible. Yes, it is the poop function. God. FI poop function. Yes, she has FI poop function. Great. Thank you, guys. You know, always here for the lulz. Never not. The poop trickster. Thank you, BM Christie. God. Love you, bro. I love you, Nathan. So anyway, the FI poop function, which basically means that she really, really struggles with morality. And it's like, oh, hi, I have ESFP demon, right? Here's the thing, though. What's interesting about ESFP demon is that, like, sometimes it's like it has this like justification complex where it's like, ooh, I'm justified in being spiteful towards other people. The problem is that she ends up becoming super spiteful, basically for the wrong reasons. That's what happens. So her spite basically ends up being morally wrong. Sometimes spite is not morally wrong. But in this case, it is morally wrong. It is morally wrong every time for her. Because her feminine primary function is extroverted thinking, basically. And it's morally wrong. Because this is supposed to be an FI parent, and it's not an FI parent, it just ends up being a trickster, and this FI function is like, okay, it's entirely inept, it's basically worthless, and she continues while she... So basically, because it's morally wrong, it means that her super ego is acting at all times delusional, basically. She has a delusional super ego. And as much as she tries to like think that she's trying to be fair or being just with how she shits on other people, basically, and holds other people accountable from that perspective, especially out of spite, when she's mocking other people, when she's desecrating other people, doing these things, well, she's being delusional about it. Entirely. She's being delusional. And that's why. Because extroverted thinking, feminine primary, leads to introverted feeling trickster, not able to be delusional. Versus my ESFP demon is absolutely morally correct with the suffering it causes other people. Because it's fair and justified.
Well, he's more correct.
And necessary.
Okay, I see you.
Yeah. I mean, it's just reality. I can't deny it. No one can, because we all know why I like to use a knife. Because guns are too quick. But her, she'd use guns. That's not going to work for me. Anyway, so we have, I wonder how my ignorant function would look like. Oh, sorry, Duggo. Looks like the audience has already taken up the ignorant function thing label. You probably offer something better during the stream, I'm just saying, bro. He's like, and now he's face palming hard. he's like, bro. Okay. No. He's like, bruh. Let's be straight. That's what he's doing. He's doing bruh while playing Rocket League. Anyway, at this hour. So, whatever. All right, but yeah. Elizabeth would be delusional with her introverted feeling from this perspective because it is more long. Hopefully, that answers your question, Mr. Duggo. You're too late to coin poop function, Duggo. No, he's not. He is not too late. If he can actually give me a better label for it, that'd be great. And then he'll just update the wiki, and then it'll be law for the EU hacker community forever. God bless him. So that's just kind of how it is. But yeah, this is in general what the poop function actually is. Also known, ignorance, but it's not. We don't have the official label for it. This is just the phenomenon that's actually happening, folks. All right, any questions? Please put your questions in the chat right now. Come on, I'm sure we got people who are plenty good at asking questions right now, so please do that. That would help. I mean, if not, and then you have something else you're going to explain?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
All right, you're jumping in. Fib is jumping in. Great.
Test?
Yeah, you're good, man. They can hear you. Yeah, all right, cool.
So, first of all, at the very beginning, Chase barely mentioned it a little bit, but the reason why it's called the dilemma function between for example, let's say TI primary and FI primary, this is the dilemma that happens throughout Chase's life versus the two octograms that he has, being SDUF and UDUF, UF versus SF, right? TI being SF, right, and FI being UF. And this is Chase overall. This is his overall life dilemma, which is why it's called the dilemma function. Now, I would like to throw a little asterisk, because originally I just said it is the dilemma between the two functions, but then Chase just started calling the one that you're not focused on the dilemma function, which is fine. I don't mind it at all. But I just wanted to note the origin of that being called the dilemma function, and to note that is, in case people didn't connect the dots, it is your virtuous octogram versus your viceful octogram throughout your life. The more Chase gets into this charmer-like energy with his FI, he definitely gets more viceful. But at the same time, vice is also where the source of power is, which also when you transition back to SF, SF tries to consume power, and vice is where the source of power is. Anyway, the other thing I'd like to add is, now, why do we call it ignorance? Now, we might change the name, as Chase says, but where it comes from is, let's say you're a very intellectually stimulating person, and you're focused on TI. Have you ever seen one of those really dorky dudes that are extremely intellectual, but have zero social perception? That's what happens. If I'm so specialized on just trying to find the most truthfulness of life, I'm just going to be completely inept socially. That's just something that happens. Or, if I think I can outlast everything, I'm just not going to become versatile enough because I'm just going to do the same thing over and over and over again.
Can we call it the inept function?
Inept? I wouldn't call it inept, but I think ignorance is the right thing, because I'm pushing so hard one direction. I'm going to start to ignore it the other way. Handicap function? I wouldn't call it handicap either. Or from Chase's perspective, right? He's trying so hard to solve problems.
Yes.
But he doesn't realize the effect it has on the social. He doesn't even realize how it comes off socially. He doesn't even see the people cringing about him.
Nope.
No, not a lot. And then he walks away, and he's like, wait, they didn't like me? Why the hell didn't they like me? And he gets in a really...
They can fuck off.
Yeah. But another thing to note about all of these, I actually suggested the idea of the Ron attitude, and that's because any of the ignorant functions have the Ron attitude. When you look at someone that their ignorant function is on their hero, they become extremely collateral. If you look at someone with their parent, they become extremely irresponsible. Someone like this is extremely childish. You know, Chase is FE childish, extremely childish. It rages when people don't appreciate him. Or, you know, someone with an inferior, they become extremely baby. I mean, Duggo has his little FE baby sometimes. Okay, not to, but so on. You can extrapolate that pattern all the way through, right? But anyway, I just wanted to add that because those were some notes that Chase added. The FI primary. From Elizabeth's perspective, her FI Trickster is even worse than all of the other Tricksters from ENTPs. Why is that? Well, at least all of the other ENTPs at least have some access to their child or their parents or something to hold them down. But to someone that's focused on TE only, it's only about facts and reasons. And so as long as it's facts, as long as I can source it somewhere, it is true to them. But that doesn't mean it's good. That doesn't mean there's positive feedback. They just completely ignore feedback at all. And you know, this happens with Elizabeth. She only gives criticism, but she's unable to take criticism. And then she completely just has wrong morals as a result of her inability to take criticism. Maybe even as an... I don't know what they were saying. But basically, the SDUF ENTPs are the ones that always dish criticism, but never can take it, right? Which is why they always have the most corrupt advice. Now, I'm not going to call out Elizabeth on specifically what she's doing that's wrong, but she can figure it out, right? But I still like the label ignorant. We're still brainstorming, all right? But the idea that we're getting at is, one, the attitude of it is incorrect, right? Overly childish, overly collateral, you know, overly tricked, so on, right? Overly demonic, that's a fun one. We didn't mention that. The
overly demonic.
Right?
Yeah.
For example, you look at someone like Little Man Jordan's with his really funky haircut, and it's like, it's just like, not only is it...
Amplified,
Yeah. Amplified is incorrect. But there's one other thing I want to note, and I actually was talking with Jay Ackley. You guys remember Jay Ackley?
We love Jay Ackley.
And
here recently.
I was
God
talking,
bless him.
I never mentioned it to Jay Ackley, but what we're calling the ignorant function or the poop function, which is fun. Jay Ackley had a really interesting note, and is that as much as Chase is really childish and overly, you know, basically he uses the covert contract too much, even more than most ENTPs, right? At its core, even though he's gone through so much, he's been UDF for so long, and he's so parental and he has a really thick skin, to its core, his poop function is actually super innocent. Chase's FE child is probably the most innocent FE child I've seen, in my opinion. Now, I wouldn't say it's the most mature. I just say to its core, it's the most. It's the most soft and innocent thing about him. Anyway, I'll close on that though. All right, say goodbye to me, everyone.
Later.
You can trade.
All right, we'll trade. For I have no idea why. Anyway, folks, that's the point we're trying to make here. Like, this phenomenon is absolutely critical. You have to understand, you know, maybe the ignorance function. Bye, Fib. Yeah, later, Fib. So the point is that, like, this is a consistent phenomenon. And especially when you guys are, like, considering your relationships, a lot of the criticism that people receive throughout their life is actually based on this weakness, basically, in terms of their functions, because there is just this one function that really screws a person up. And I've been talking for years in front of this audience about how I already knew that my function, the one function that screws me up the most, is my extroverted feeling child. It really absolutely is. The thing is, though, I never actually knew why. And it wasn't until we started unlocking the secrets of UCT, you know, when Fib started coming up with the concept of UCT, that we were actually able to explain why my extroverted feeling child ended up becoming the biggest problem. I should not be dropping knives. Anyway, even though it's not a knife technically, but we don't need to know that. So the point is, is that like this is insanely important. So make sure you guys are aware of this, especially with in your relationships, because your octogram ends up revealing, if you follow the logic of the UCT, that you end up realizing, oh, okay, oh, my husband or my boyfriend or or my wife or my girlfriend or my children ends up having these these ignorant functions basically, and it's just who they are. It ends up becoming a hang up that they really can't get over because of their specialization, because of their masculine or feminine primary function. And however, and if they're subconscious focused, you really shouldn't try to change that. You really shouldn't try to influence that person of that. You really shouldn't, like at all. You shouldn't do that. Because to be fair, that's abusive. Don't do it. Now, if they are unconscious focused, that is a thing. That's a thing that actually matters, okay? So make sure you guys consider that. If they really are unconscious focused, then you can influence them in such a way to get them to subconscious focus. But again, it doesn't matter what octogram you are. It doesn't matter what type you are. It does not matter. Because the reality of the situation is, it doesn't matter. Because the reality of the situation is, you will always have a function that is ignorant. You'll always have the poop function. Okay? You will always have one that is like a person's most difficult thing to deal with in their life. Always. Always. And as much as difficulty as it is with the dilemma function, for example, as much as that ends up becoming a difficulty, really this other function ends up becoming the most difficulty for any person, okay? Always. Why is it UDSF, INFJ women are at the highest risk of having TI child God complex? It's because of this, okay?
I don't have a mic on, but
that's literally why.
Relay that, what's it called? That the poop function is essentially the equivalent of the inferior for UCT.
Yeah, the poop function is the equivalent of the inferior function for UCT. All right, hold on. We got a question here. Let's take a look.
Yeah.
So, what is the cognitive attitude of the inferior poo-poo function? Oh my God.
People, you guys, don't mess with us. All right. If you mess with us, I want you to say sorry in the chat. Just type sorry.
I don't know if extroverted thinking is the most difficult to deal with. Chase, could it possibly FE for me? Would be possible with my octogram. I don't remember what your octogram is, Tony. My bad. I'm not entirely sure. But like, think about the implications with your sexual relationships. That's a huge implication, and then furthermore, implications in terms of parenting. That's also a really, really big deal because parents are so at risk. Okay, well, bro, if you're UDSF, that means introverted feeling is your masculine primary, which means extroverted thinking is basically your poop function, basically. And yeah, dude, Tony, you have this problem where you just listen to like literally all the wrong people all the time. I've noticed that. Like, and to be fair, like that's a huge weakness on your part.
At the same time, it's also very innocent.
And at the same time, it's also extremely innocent.
Like more innocent than.
Yeah, more innocent than most people. And guess what? Chris Taylor has the same issue. Okay, so like you're not alone with that. Okay, like my FE child is kind of like a shitler. Let's be fair. And everyone has a shitler function. And it just happens to be what this ignorant function actually is. So it is what it is. So. But yeah, make sure you guys are like aware of that. Yeah, I know you don't know. All right, so hold on. Okay, BM Christie says I might have missed it, but does this apply to a person's opposite gender function? For example, SE parent and NI child. What are you talking about?
By the way, I don't want to make a naive claim, but whatever BM Christie asks, you always ask good questions, so you should listen.
All right, so for a UDSF ISP, okay.
Understand.
No, that's not the. If it's a male ISTP, it's TI hero, which means extroverted feeling inferior would be the function that they suck at. Let's be honest.
It's only to do with the primary function. and the axis of the primary.
Yeah,
function.
don't ask about man's feminine primary function. Come on. No, don't ask that question. No, Tony.
Well, we
no.
could be misinterpreting his question, but it wasn't ball asked, so I don't blame
No,
us.
it's just Tony. I moved on to another one.
Okay. Should I move on the convo? I can.
Huh?
I can move on the convo.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we're kind of out of questions about this.
Yeah, sure. Move on the convo. Let's do it.
This is something that you agreed with me on this a while ago, but you kind of forgot.
Nice. Maybe I did forget. It's okay.
But to be fair, you had a bunch of shots in you, so
I did.
I don't. So
Maybe.
let's take you again.
Cool.
Now I am actually going to erase some of the labels because I actually need more space around them. Say goodbye. All right, so here's your masculine function. Specifically, this side of the mind is male, ENTP.
We're also talking about Andrew Tate right now for the lulz.
Yeah, why
just
not?
let you know.
UDSF. And now we also have the other three sides of the mind. Now the question I inquired a bunch of months ago actually is what octagram are you in each side of the mind? That was actually, you remember that I asked that question?
Oh yeah.
Now we actually solved it, and the answer is actually really simple. Whatever octagram you are in your ego also applies to every other side. Now this just makes sense. If I have a certain history, that history is going to apply blanketly across all of myself, right? It's not like I transition and now my nature is different. That makes no sense, right? So I am now going to write let's see, UDSF in every other side of the mind, and this is going to lead somewhere. So you guys need to be patient with me. I know I expect patience. You can project a little bit, right? There's stuff in my way. Elizabeth, you gotta get out of my way. So we got ESFP, right? UDSF, which is kind of funny to think about. Like your super ego is UDSF. Even your super ego.
Super ego.
Yeah,
I
like
hope to ruin people's lives.
Yeah, to make them better at the same
To
time.
make them better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like
It's
your brain
about
hope.
pruning. It's about pruning, and
Yeah.
you'll have hope after I cut your limbs off because they're dead. And if I don't cut your limbs off, the gangrene will get to the rest of your system and kill you.
Now, there's one more piece to the equation, and this is the last piece, which is, so we have TI primary right here. Now, which primary function is in the other three? That's the question. And then also another question to deal with that is what gender is in the other three? I left it out purposefully. I'm going to start writing the answer. So you take TI and you orbit it for the unconscious. And so in his unconscious, his INTJ is TE primary, which means his unconscious is actually feminine. It's actually a female. So his ego is male and his unconscious is male. Now over here, ISFJ.
Oh, wait a minute. I guess that means Carl Jung is full of shit when it comes to his anima and animus theory. Oh, we're just debunking it right now.
Anyway, you take TI. What's the axis of TI? FE. So FE is your primary function, and it's also feminine, right? So you're female. Now, what's the reflection? I think you can figure it out. It's FI, right? Which makes your superego also male, right? When you rage, you always have some sort of masculine hatred about it, right? Now that is just a little piece to throw in it. Now, there's one other thing to notice about it is in every octagram, no matter where Chase is, he always exhibits parental energy as his main focus or specialization. Chase's entire life is about responsibility, which is why when we go back to the dilemma function stuff that I erased, it goes back to Chase's entire life is about the battleground of responsibility, right? Chase's entire past, he talks about how he used to be so irresponsible and he used to be such a piece of shit, and I always feel like a piece of shit.
I thought I was going to say if he didn't.
Yeah. Nowadays, he feels more responsible and he can live with himself, right? His poop function is okay with himself, right? But that's
For the
because
most part.
no matter where he is, no matter the situation in life, there's always an overarching focus on this battleground. And this parental energy, even if it's not the exact same function, has an overarching impact. Now, let's take a different octagram, right? Let's take someone that is UDSF, but an introvert, so they're focused on male. They'd be focused on their hero function. Well, that heroic energy is going to be throughout the side of the mind. Or let's say they're focused on an inferior function. The inferior function is going to be all the way, right? Someone like me, right? My inferior function is completely dominant. Even when I'm using my demon, my demon comes off angelic because it's trying to aspire in all the other sides of my mind. It's a little weird. Or someone like Duggo, right? Duggo's trying to be heroic, right? He's coming in and he's like, I'm going to fight the big bad guy, which is Chase. I'm going to correct him when he's wrong. So anyway, there's one other thing, and I think Chase has talked about it on our specialized gender groups. But if you are UF, you are if you are a UF female, you are more emasculating. This is going to be funny, right? All right, this is going to start how do you spell it?
Emasculating.
Emasculating. It's about that, right? And if you're a male UF, you're actually you're feminine, basically. You're like one of those femboys. What's the right femboys to be funny? Right?
Femboy.
Femboys, right? I don't know if you guys can read that. Hopefully you can. My handwriting's
now.
Anyway,
Well, on the
so if
camera.
you're UF, right? So to add context, if you are SF and you're a male, you're gonna fulfill more your proper gender role, just naturally. But if you're UF, you're gonna fulfill more of the opposite gender role, right? You don't want to be a femboy, I promise you. Okay, you guys could quote me on that.
That's where the Thai lady boys are. You don't want to be that.
And the logic for why this is true actually comes from these assumptions right here. Now, what happens is, if this is gonna be hard to explain because it's gonna get confusing with the squares. But I'm gonna try it just with these two right here. So everyone ignore the right real quick. We're just gonna do these two, right? Let's say I am UD-UF ENTP male. I'm gonna be focused on FI primary.
Oh, look, it's Mr. Right.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, if I'm focused on FI primary, where am I? I am far from my ego. What does that mean? I'm actually far from my place of rest. So, as much as I'm focused on FI, this is actually very far away from my default state. This is very stressful life to live. Don't get me wrong. This is not a fun life to live. I'm sure Mr. Right has gone through it. Okay? How do you, as an UDUF person, get to your place of rest? The answer is cognitive transition. Because if you go to your INTJ side is still UD-UF, because that is changed, right? And what is UDF INTJ is going to be focused on? TI. So ironically, Mr. Right, or any UDF ENTP, going to their shadow, brings them back to their place of rest in their ego. This is why, for example, you look at UF people drink way more. As silly as it is, they just drink more alcohol, they get on more substances, because they're trying so hard to get out of these stressful places in life and back to anything less stressful, right? Bringing them back to their ego. And the thing is, yeah, let's say they do that. Let's say they drank and they went back to they smoked or something, they bring them back to a more place of rest. Well, what happened to their gender? It flipped. Wait, I just realized this is wrong. I meant to circle FE. You notice that? Because it's supposed to be orbit. All right, guys. If anyone called out that blunder, like they said it to themselves, you're right, okay? I was wrong. Anyway, right here. Their gender flipped. Did you notice that? So me cognitive transitioning brought me back to my place of rest, but it also flipped my gender because now I'm focused on a feminine function, hence the E. And so this is why, what?
I am a man.
You are a man. Yeah, so anyone UF, I mean, yeah, if they're in their ego, they are going to be in their proper gender role. Yeah, but it's just not going to work because they're in a bad place of the mind. Right? And it's a very, like I said, it is not very restful. It's a very stressful place to be. You're not in a place of rest. So they transition to sides of the mind where it is more comfortable using stimulants, using situations, using people sometimes, especially women like to use people. But in hence of doing that, their gender role flips. For example, if you're a woman, you will have your feminine function focused down here, but then you'll transition to a place of rest, but then you're using a masculine function. And then you become an emasculating woman. And this is what Chase talks about a lot, especially in the women's group. If you're not in the women's group, there you are.
Probably should be.
But yeah, so that's another crux to this. So now we have more information about the sides of the mind, what octogram is on each side of the mind, the primary function of each side of the mind, depending on your cognitive state, and gender dynamics on which focus you are. SD doesn't really have that issue because SD types default to their state of rest. So any transition they do is going to push them back towards default more. Hence, being UF is a negative feedback cycle and SF being a positive feedback cycle in life, right? Where all the effort you invest into being SF grows and grows and makes it easier and easier. And all the effort you invest into UF becomes worse and worse and worse until you completely derail your life into something terrible.
Yes. Don't forget, folks, remember, if you are unconscious focused, if you are a man, a woman can't help you get out of unconscious focus. Only other men can. And if you are a woman, men are the ones who can get you out of unconscious focus, not fellow women. Just let you know.
Okay. All right. Anyway, that's the next thing I wanted to add. Now you have to say goodbye to fib part 2. So like say bye in the chat, part 2. All right, that's it. Bye fib. Bye fib.
My fib, indeed. All right, cool. So we have just gone over the poop function and what that is, also known as potentially the ignorant function, which apparently fib likes. So, and Duggo does not. So be aware of this phenomenon and be aware of all of these things so that you guys can make sure that you understand UCT at a very important. Oh, hold on. Can any gender pull themselves out of UF, though, without external factors? No, not really. Usually, people can't pull themselves out of unconscious focus. It requires other people in some capacity. I was able to pull my... someone else to siphon, exactly. Because, like, I was not able to do that because, as Fib pointed out, like, I've been struggling with irresponsibility my whole life. The more people who were depending on me, the more responsible I had to actually be. And it's because of that pressure of being responsible for others, I was actually able to utilize that pressure in order to actually pull myself out of unconscious focus and get back into subconscious focus, regardless of the abuse that I was suffering from my marriage to Brett. So, and that's ultimately what happened, you know, as a result. So, and that's why it happened. So, all right, cool. I think we've beaten the dead horse at this point. That's it for Cutting Edge, January 2024. I'll see you folks next month for February 2024. And thanks for watching and listening. I'll see you guys next episode. Later.